All right, we are going to try something new today. Let me start by apologizing. I try not to take days off, but unfortunately I moved this weekend and found that I'm a little bit older than I thought I was and hurt my knee. I want to be there for the lab tomorrow. I don't want to show up, or sorry. Yeah, no, it is going to be tomorrow. I want to show up for the lab tomorrow. I don't want to be hurt. I want to be able to, can't have a sub for that. So I'm going to take a day. I might go see a doctor, but it'll be okay. Today you have the same responsibility. I've talked you through it a couple of times. You're going to be going forward to do another unit. You'll have an exit ticket. Before we do that, I want to get in and go over the homework. And you will remember that we did the characteristic properties of matter as our last unit on Friday. And if you didn't finish it, it was for homework. So we are going to go over the answers to the questions. For those of us who did the right Explore tab, not the Engage tab, I want you to remember that today that you're supposed to do the Explore tab. Don't do the Engage tab, right? In fact, I want you to take a minute right now and open up your characteristic properties of matter on your Discovery Education, and let's get ready to go over this. I am going to give you about 30 seconds to do this. Let's stare awkwardly at the camera for 30 seconds. 15 seconds now. Get 5, 4, you should be there. 2, 1. All right. So your first page looked like this, and down at the bottom, we were asked to identify from 2 mysterious pieces of metal, right? I give you 2 pieces of metal, and I want you to figure out if they're the same kind of metal. What of these characteristics that we talked about would be the same? Well, if I have 2 pieces of copper, they do not have to be the same height. They could be, but they don't have to be. They do not have to be the same mass. For some of you who asked a question, I talked about a penny versus a copper pipe, right? We're in 2 pieces of copper pipe. And we also know that the volume does not have to be the same. But copper, in particular, is identified by its color. In fact, its color is called copper. Nickels are all nickel-colored. Steel is the color of steel. Electrical conductivity is also going to be the same. That's why we use the same kind of metals and wires all over the place. The density is always going to be the same. Why is the density always going to be the same? We will talk about that later, but I want you to know that if we're talking about the same kind of matter, the density will always be the same. The melting point is actually always going to be the same. It's why we know when water freezes. All water freezes at the same temperature. This actually has to do with density. All ice cubes melt at the same temperature. We boil water at the same temperature. All of this is the same. So when I submit that, yes, I'm a science teacher. I know these, thankfully. We go on. The second question was a bit harder, right? And it asked you to decide whether physical or which of these measurements were physical or characteristics. Physical or chemical characteristics. I'll be honest with you, this is one of the few times you will actually need to know this, but here we go. The temperature of a thing is strictly a physical characteristic. It is not a chemical characteristic. However, the ability to neutralize an acid is a chemical characteristic because it talks about chemical compounds and you see it in chemical reactions. Flakes off some of the substance. Completely physical. It's a texture thing. Burns in a flame. This is a chemical thing, right? Does it burn? Well, flammability is chemical. Plastics burn. Woods burn. Iron, not so much. Releases a gas when dropped into water. That's going to be a chemical characteristic. And calculates the ratio of its mass to its volume. I'm going to go with physical on that. Let's see if I am right. Hey, right? These are all physical versus chemical characteristics because we see some with physical measurements, with the mass, the weight, the volume, as opposed to chemical characteristics that happen during a chemical reaction. Last but not least, We have two substances that you are trying to identify, each sample being solid at room temperature, at least 5 steps in an appropriate sequence you might take to identify what the substance is. So this was wide open. You could have really done anything for this. The book suggests that you might begin by looking at them. Take a look at their color, see what colors they are. See if you can scratch them to figure out how hard they are. Do you know what Mohs scale is? I don't know what Mohs scale is, but you might test the texture, see how hard they are. You might measure their volume. You might then take their mass and figure out their density. You might try and melt them. You might try and burn them. You might try and react them with bases and acids. You might do all kinds of sciencey things to try and figure out what these things are. You could have really put anything that was a test for physical objects, right? We could have tried to melt it. We could have tried to burn it. We could have tried to figure out its density, its mass, its volume. You could have looked at it. Any of that would have worked. As long as you took your time, figured out how you could test this thing to figure out what it is, you are good here. Now, to prove to me that you actually watched to the end of the video and didn't not, you have a place to put a submission in your Do Now, and I want you to tell me what your favorite liquid is. I'm thinking of this because I just found out the place by my house sells Boost slushies, and I love Boost. If you've never heard of what Boost is, well, you should find out. But what is your favorite liquid? All right.